So we're with Samar Ocean Wolf Ciprian, and today we're at Sky River Sanctuary, and we are located in the Coromandel Peninsula, New Zealand, in the middle of the South Pacific. And I've had the pleasure of coming here and spending time with you over the last few years with my partner Jessica as a guest to your beautiful environment here, and it's been beautiful. I loved it. So whilst I've been here, I've done meditation, I've done chanting, and it's something that was new to me, and I had to sort of really relax myself into that, and when I did, it was quite special. Had some amazing dreams. It's a place of dreams, and you know, over the last 3 to 4 years we've got to know each other personally through my partner Jess, but during that time I don't fully understand what you do, and I know that you travel a lot, you carry a beautiful energy with you, you work with a lot of people around the world, you continue to educate yourself, you educate a lot of people, and you've done a lot of special things in your life, and you've seen a lot of beautiful things too. So Samar, I guess my first question for you is, when people ask you about, you know, the work you do, how do you explain the work you do to other people?
Hi Brendan, thank you so much for that introduction, and also your heartfelt dedication to this place, because the work is inextricable from this place. That question is a question I get a lot, and it's really difficult to understand from the construct of kind of modern society's perception of work. To me, this is not really a career, it's not really a job, it's really a devotion. So there's really two things that I do on the level of offerings. One is custodianing, running, supporting, being in service to an organization called Tulish Indigenous Arts. It had a name formerly, but at this point it is in deep devotion to Donalihio Panti's Yucatec Maya lineage. And so what that is a healing system that came from the jungles of Belize and really changed a lot of people's lives around the world. So it has been colloquially known as Mayan massage, but that term is a little bit problematic. Tulish is a Yucatec word for dragonfly. So I know this is a long, circuitous way to answer your question, but I have to tell the story. So this Institute of Indigenous Arts is really a way for people to remember the medicine that's in their bones through the practical applications of body work and spiritual healing. But it's so much more than that, and I sometimes find this question so difficult to answer. I've just come out of a month of training here at Sky River, and we've had 3 back-to-back containers, and I'm constantly blown away by the human capacity to remember. So they remember how to heal themselves, they remember how to heal each other, they remember how to work with plants, they remember how to dream, they remember how to restore the body, the mind, the spirit. So on a practical level, we're teaching massage work, we're teaching working with plants, we're teaching indigenous arts, and that's not just from the perspective of one culture, but it's more like seed sharing. So for a lot of people in detribalized society, they've forgotten those ways. Those ways were either taken from them by war or diaspora or settlement or other traumas in their history. And so through the relationship with this living lineage in Belize, and we work very closely with Donalihio's niece and her work at Eligio Panti National Park to preserve 13,000 acres of Maya rainforest. So many people from all over the world have had the opportunity to remember the traditions that are in their hands. So my dad is Arab, my mom is from Afghanistan originally. I came to this work through dreaming and through being called to a forest in Northern California that really led me to this. And it was only 10 years into my clinical practice, even though that's a really weird thing to say about this work. Let's say client practice. It was a decade into that my dad told me that my grandmother used to do the same work. Wow. I never knew that she would go to people's homes and massage their bellies postpartum and move their uteruses back into place, and therefore prevent a lot of physical pathology such as prolapses or sacral injuries or postpartum depression or a diastasis recti or whatever it is. It would restore the body, but it would also restore the spirit. And I, as a kid, grew up with these traditions through the lens of my dad's culture, but then met them again through an intact culture that had the vernacular to share it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Qoya, which we've just come out of a week of doing this, and that is a really indescribable and beautiful movement practice that tends community, supports the healing of trauma and brings in a lot of ritual and medicine through inspirations from the Andes. And Qoya is one of those things that unless you do it, you'll never be able to understand it. So for people listening, it's body work and it's movement work, but it's so much more than that. So I hope that answered your question to some degree.
Yeah, it's, I'm interested when you talk about medicine in your bones. It does feel like it really takes you back into yourself and the internal healing, that the medicine is here, but we don't know how to find it. We've sort of lost touch with ourselves, and that's sort of what you're doing with plants and holistically and physically through I guess your hands and energy.
Yeah. When I'm hearing your question, what I'm really remembering a lot of the focus of the last week. So the last Qoya teacher training we did was really coming through a lens of compassionate decolonization. And I found that without necessarily me actively meaning to, my life has led me to a place where I have to behave as a bridge between two cultural realities. And they're not necessarily singular cultural realities. They're the dominant culture and then everybody else who has had to kind of submit to the way in which the dominant culture teaches us about our bodies and teaches us about our relationships with the living world. And because my life has been such that I've had to move between them, like having two parents who come from very intact tribal societies, but being born in the Western world and having to move around in that space. It is the medicine in our bones, but it's also a time where we have to understand we're all human. And so in sharing these techniques, in sharing these art forms, there's an incredible opportunity for human beings to get out of their boxes around, this kind of person and that kind of person, this kind of approach to education and that kind of approach to education, this kind of medicine and that kind of medicine, to really understanding our species and really understanding that it's the separateness that we have kind of found ourselves in that's causing so much damage ecologically and causing so much harm to people around the world. So in 2019, I was really called to work on tree protection in Tamaki Makaurau, and I realized that the reason trees were in so much danger is because of a damaged relationship between European settlers and Maori, and that conversation hasn't really happened. And so this projection onto flora rather than the healing that happens between people, it's happening all over the world. And we're destroying life so fast because we can't face our own shadows. And in both Tulish and in Qoya, I feel like if I were to go down to the seed crux of why do I do this work, it's that if human beings don't get a handle on their own shadow, they're going to kill everything in sight. And so when they sit together, when they massage each other's bellies, when they give each other a spirit bath using plants and prayers, when they swim in that ocean together, when they dance together, when they pray together, when they chant together, when they listen to someone else's story, they start to recognize the other person is just like them. And that a tree might also be just like them. And an animal might be just like them. And then you start to question everything. You start to question your, excessive use of AI, or these stories about racial profiling of certain groups, or like even the methods of decolonization that are being used that could end up with more destruction, like cutting down trees just because they come from here or there, but really the impacts on the ecosystem are so devastating. So for me, it's about standing for life. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Certainly have.
Or asked more questions.
Opened up a lot of questions. Yeah. I guess, you talk about shadow, and, we've moved from a colonialization aspect to now working on doing similar aspect in regards to trees and things. Talk to me more about shadow. What does it mean, and how, where do you see that shadow in society, maybe in New Zealand and globally as well?
Yeah, so I was born to two parents who, when I say they're tribal, it also inherently suggests that their lands have been and continue to be the targets of the imperial project. And so for my mother, there's no access to my motherland. There's been complete destruction. For my father, the Gulf is a very, outwardly wealthy area, but our lands are completely denuded of what we knew growing up, because everything prioritizes commerce, not us being able to see our sea anymore, not us being able to move freely through the space anymore. And so, there's been death of people, there's also been death of land, and all of that is really in service to one system. And that system in this era belongs to, a certain class and group of people, but throughout human history, it's just about domination. And that domination is about resource control. And I think that when we want more than we need, it's because we've separated ourselves from the immense connection to all of life. So shadow is just whatever we don't let ourselves feel. So in terms of in Aotearoa, I think it's very interesting. I don't want to speak for the settler experience because I'm not a European settler. I was a migrant, and they're slightly different things. I have my own experience, but from listening to people, I think that there's so much loss of home for Europeans. There's so much longing for roots, that the only expression that there is to destroy that face in a tree to then prove that you belong here. But that's not effectively doing any land back from Maori. It's not effectively improving any conditions for anybody. It's just killing. And so whenever you see settler mentality, you see mass genocide, whether it's people or plants or animals or insects or whatever. Whereas the real shadow that needs to be dealt with is that deep cry inside people where I lost my home. Now, whatever reason a person lost their home, I left my home at age 9 because of war. I've recently, in the last couple of years, lost a close family member due to war, in horrific ways. War has been there our whole lives. And interfacing with, again, Western society is a difficult term, but I mean, the US, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, interfacing primarily in educational spaces with Europeans in those countries, the story that's told to people is that the Arab world is inherently violent, and those things happen there, and those happen to those people. And what's been obfuscated is the conditions that have led to those wars that are always begun in the current empire. And 1,000 years ago, the empire was in a different place. But the real pain of people when they're dehumanized on top of losing everything is very difficult for the dominant culture to accept. And when kind of society talks about white fragility, or they talk about white tears, it's a difficult term. I think it's very important for people in the dominant culture to be allowed to cry and to be allowed to grieve what they lost, because until they do, they won't have empathy for people who all their lives are facing extreme racialization. And the consequences are much bigger and much harder than it is for, say, a New Zealander, right? I'm not minimizing people's individual experiences. I'm just speaking to the generalities. And tying this back into the work that I do, you know, this work, Tulish, came out of a Maya culture. It was through its previous iteration taken into the US. It helped a lot of people. But as it was, taken into that society, the focus became on continuing education. It became on licensing. It became on branding. Those are the things that became the priority, not the spirit of the work and not the people that the work came from. Mm-hmm. When that happened, the people whose culture it belonged to were excluded from access because they don't have licensing and they don't have the money to get the CE hours, but it's their work.
Yes.
And so in the process of unraveling this, it's been such a huge challenge to try to get the language, to get people in dominant cultures to understand that, medicine is there for everyone, but you have to be able to share. Like you really have to be able to learn to share again. And that's a gift of community culture. That's what I think has been lost in settler society. So I'll stop talking right now.
Yeah, that's good. It's nice.
Yeah.
Now, I'm thinking about storytelling, so the Mayan, the history in there, like all the medicines and everything would have been communicated since ancient history through lots of storytelling and lots of learning. And that sort of process, I guess, is moving into Western medicine and, I guess copyright and things like that are moving into commercialize that. Mm-hmm. But it's also protecting the tradition and where it came from. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the work you're doing?
Yeah, so I think on the surface, to a commerce-based eye, it would look like I made some very dumb decisions. But from the perspective of the land and the people and all the other people and the dreaming, it was about restoring access to Indigenous people to their own work, while also not pushing away everybody else who needs it. Because Europeans were colonized first.
Yes.
They lost everything first. And that's why the memory is so distant. And that's why you see Coachella and other festivals where you see a white dude with dreads with a ponamu and a poncho and 7 feathers, and it's a caricature, but it's also a deep longing for culture. It's also a deep longing for a family. It's a deep longing to belong in a community. And I think that there's a term that I feel it's very important to use is compassionate decolonization. Compassionate decolonization is a model where everybody has a place at the table, but people are tended according to need. So if someone's leg is broken or someone has a scratch on their hand, the way that you would care for them is different. It's not that their chair is less. It's not that their space on the table is less. And I think that that's what's missing, is that everyone is so traumatized, is that the only way they know how to get through the day is to dehumanize someone else. Because this systemic disrespect for life has gone on for such a long time. And we have to train each other and help each other to treat other people as humans and treat other living things as people. And we're in the midst of ecological collapse. There's no other work on earth right now that's more important to my mind than a reverence for life. And so that's my guiding principle in everything that I do.
And so the work you do through, say, Qoya and your body work and the teachings that you make or you share, how does that help on, I guess, a micro level where we can make a difference, within the world, but starting within ourselves? And how does your work, and I'm interested in Qoya and how that really impacts the body and the spirit.
So with Qoya, I want to honor Rochelle Schiek, who received the transmission of Qoya through her journeys in the Andes. I think when you have people living in a modern time, gathering in a space where the music and the prayers and the ability to sit and listen to other people and drop defenses, even if they're kicking and screaming when their defenses come down, happens, you start to drop into a very primal space of truth. And so I think when you asked your question of how does it start to impact people in their personal lives, is for those titrated micro moments, like they feel things they have to suppress all day. Mm-hmm. So when they feel things they have to suppress all day, whether that's joy, whether that's grief, whether that's creativity, whether that's anger, whether that's physical pain that they don't let themselves feel because they're like, holding themselves together to work all the time, they don't forget that. So when they feel it and they go back into their lives, they're sitting in the office or they're sitting wherever and a song comes on or a physical sensation comes on that happened in the movement studio, it changes them. They leave that space very different, and they also have tools to come back to deal with discomfort in real time and to return to the body. And when they return to the body and they return to the space where they're in the field of multiple different bodies having that same experience, and you open your senses and you move through the world, it's very difficult to look away when you hear another person screaming. Or it's very difficult to look away when someone's cutting down a tree and you feel the pain of that tree. It just makes people more sensitive to life. So that's, I think, like a simple way to say it is embodiment creates responsibility. Like it just does. You can't live in your body really without understanding that the way you move in this world impacts other bodies around you. So that's the same thing with Tulish. It's like if you're going to touch another person's abdomen, if you're going to move organs, if you're going to hold someone while they're sobbing about a baby who died, or like feel a post-surgical scar, or be with someone in their extreme like health distress, and you have any judgment about the human body, they're going to feel that. So you have to deconstruct all the societal conditioning that places one above the other, that creates hierarchies, that creates separation if you're really going to do that work. You can't do that work from the hamster wheel of supremacy. Otherwise, it's just moving your hands. It's not the work.
Absolutely. And so the being with grief and trauma in the Qoya can help be a safe place to take people into that space, but also you provide the tools for them to work through in that space and to come back out of that space in a safe way. And it feels like at a human level, we've got to be with our grief, our trauma in a safe environment so that we can stand strong and be solid and do the things you're talking about, speaking up when we see a tree getting chopped down that shouldn't be, or something's happening to another human being or a society that shouldn't be. We can work on our own traumas, our own shadow and trauma and grief sort of come together.
I think there's so much grief in the world, and I also think that communal societies, so what you would sometimes call indigenous societies, societies that had multi-generational homes and lived tribally and lived somewhat seasonally and lived with their lands and died with their lands. Grief is an inextricable part of everyday life. Birth and death were things that happened either in the home or close by. Everyone was involved. There was some spiritual basis, whether it was animist or polytheist or monotheist, to welcome the living and to farewell the dead. And so one's perception of themselves is very different from a capitalist society where you suspend the idea that you will ever die.
Mm-hmm.
You never talk about death. You act and live to the last minute as though you will never die. And you accrue and eat and eat and eat selfishly within just for one person. And it's just different ways of being. And it's difficult when 3 or 4 generations later through capitalism have happened for a person to separate from those ideas, you know, because the intensity of competitiveness, of success, of like, these are the things I have to do to be accepted by society. I must have self-worth. People must respect me. Did I do a good job? I don't know that those ideas are at the forefront of community societies, because communal societies fundamentally don't ostracize community members because they know that it's group survival. So even if you are deeply damaged and not contributing financially or even contributing with your labor, there are spaces for you. That's what a community society is, because it could happen to anyone. You know, it's like watching a pack of wolves. When they're moving, the most vulnerable are in the middle. They're not on the edges. The strongest ones are on the edges or at the back, because the elders and the children, they have to be cared for. Because they are valuable because they exist. And I think that what can happen in spaces like Qoya and spaces like Tulish is that especially detribalized people, like people who come from non-communal societies, for maybe the first time, feel what it's like to be in a group of people and not be in competition. So while you can never create safety for another, you can start to set the tone of what it would be like. And that memory is very strong inside human beings. That is a species imperative to live as community. And it's difficult. There's a lot of unraveling. And I'm not a fan of just saying for Europeans, because I don't think that's true. I think that there are many communal societies in Europe. I think that we're talking about very specific settler societies, really. We're talking about settlers versus communities, communal society versus settler society. So for a lot of settler society, you have to forget what your ancestors did to the indigenous people in order to live. If you remember, it would kill you. You know, if you want to keep your heart open, but you also have to remember what your great-great-great-grandfather had to do to the people who were already in the place you showed up in. The dissonance is so strong that you'd have a psychological breakdown.
Yes.
So that repair is fundamental. If we want to protect rainforests, if you want to protect the Hauraki Gulf, if you want to protect eucalyptuses and pine trees here, which are absolutely important because geological time is happening, and native forests cannot grow back under these conditions without existing canopy. They're not going to. People can argue with me, but they're not going to. If you think that they will, you are suspending science. So if you want to protect life, you have to confront the original wound of separation. And I think that part of how capitalism prevents settler societies from doing that is it weakens the emotional resiliency in people to feel shame, and the emotional resiliency in people to feel like they ever did anything wrong. So it's like all the time you have to avoid that feeling, so that you never look, so that a genocide in Palestine can happen and people just scroll past. And they're like, it's fine, because it's not me. They're not my people, but they're your species. Do you see what I mean? So I know it's a lot of words, but I hope that it makes some sense.
Yeah, I'd say the people in Palestine, how do they live with compassion? Because they seem like such compassionate people in this dire position they're in. How do they maintain that compassion, and is compassion enough?
I mean, I can't speak for Palestinians. I know Palestinians and I've heard their stories. I have Iraqi family members and Afghani family members, and you know, there's people all over the world who are suffering unimaginable horrors. I think that when you look at the resiliency of communities like Palestinians, one of the things one of the qualities that becomes really, really palpable to an outsider is faith. And whether that faith is rooted in a religious identity or whether that faith is rooted in love for one's land, it's a faith that transcends a fear of death. And I think that if you're not afraid that you're going to lose everything, then you have much more access to compassion than someone who's like, I'm okay with hurting you as long as I get to keep my stuff. And so that faith is taught through community. That love for one's land is taught through community. And I come back to my original point, is that in settler societies, when you're not allowed to have a community, you make some very weird decisions. Yes. Do you see what I mean? And it's not that one human is more important than another human. It's not that one human is less capable of compassion than another human. It's that the conditions that a child needed to understand how to exist in an ecosystem was, settler societies were deprived of it.
It's been lost.
Yeah, you weren't allowed. Because to maintain, I'm not speaking about you as an individual, but let's say you asked the question about New Zealand, right? You weren't allowed to see Maori as fully human. Even if, like people from my partner's generation would say, yeah, we all grew up, we were all friends. It's like, of course. But there was also the dawn raids and all kinds of things and land theft. It's like if you saw people as fully human, then you couldn't have one set of rules for one group and one set of rules for another.
That's right. It was only just over, within 100 years ago, Tama Iti's father's brother was shot on a Pakeha's farm, which was stolen from Tama Iti's family. And, so it's only a very short period of time that these things have been happening. And, it's really sad on, where that's come from and how, I guess I'm part of that, culture that was involved on the shooting side of things. And then last weekend I was invited onto a marae, a tangi, and just the experience of community and realizing that has not been part of my life, but experiencing their love and their aroha and just the beauty within the community across the generations and how they speak and how they welcomed us on to the marae. And I think it's important to find the connection back to communities, particularly like it's something that I haven't grown up with. So it doesn't get handed to you. You really got to look for it and bring yourself back into that space.
Yeah, thank you. And there's so much compassion for what you've just said, because when I hear you say it didn't get handed to you, it absolutely got handed to me. And I think that's the part that is sometimes hard for, let's say, BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous people of color, who are systemically discriminated against, whether it's in educational spaces, which is really like kind of my work in the world to try and deconstruct, or whether it's politically, whether it's housing, whether it's what's happening in the US with ICE, whether it's whatever. It's very difficult sometimes to have compassion for the settler when the settler is the face of the person that causes harm. But everyone has to understand that we're all human. And that the things that were easily passed down in a community culture were not passed down in a settler culture. And so there's a lot of teaching, like co-teaching, that needs to happen. And you're right, it's like I'm not going to speak for Māori, but I have a lot of dear Māori friends who I recognize that, because I was brought up with that. I was brought up with the same thing, whether I was in Belize in a Maya person's home and they got a heart of palm and had to feed all of us with their one little heart of palm that was growing, because that's what you do when your guests come, or whether I was at my dad's house with his Bedouin mother and the goat was slaughtered to feed all the guests, or whether it's here and there's a huge pit to cook all the food to feed everybody. It's like or it's Taos Pueblo with my friends there, and it's like enormous amount of food to feed everybody. It's all about food, and it's all about welcoming everybody in and recognizing that your spirit is as valuable as somebody else's spirit. And that once that glass ceiling is shattered in settler societies, this stranglehold of like cancerous capitalism that is killing life on earth will break. Like that system, and that the system is not, it does not belong to a race. That's a system of thinking. Once it loses its hold on people's hearts, it can't. And so, like, I not under the delusion that either you or I can change the whole world, but we can impact the people around us, and we can be a cell in a body. And if that body's still alive, even if it's very unwell, your job as a cell is to be as healthy as possible. That's your job. Like, then you impact that organ and that organ system, and that organ system impacts the whole body. It's like, that's your job. And that's my job. And we are all more alike than we are different. And we have more in common with a tree than we do with a billionaire. That's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
You know? And so, sorry, you're speaking.
No, it's like, I guess, how we heal ourselves as the cell.
Yeah.
And it feels like, compassion and forgiveness is what will help move us from, I guess, the trauma and the anger and the grief through to the peace, love and joy. And in some way, without that original trauma, we don't move through the journey of life to find that peace, love and joy. And, although it's not nice at all to have in our lives, it's also part of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's interesting. I don't know that we heal ourselves. I think that we can heal in community. I think that we can do a measure of our healing by ourselves, but I think there's some healing that only ever happens with other beings, whether they're people or the ocean, or, I know the horses were really important to you, or whether it happens with trees, or whether it happens in the dreaming. I don't know that we ever do it ourselves. Whether it happens through our prayers, through our ancestors, through the things that were left for us, whatever your traditions are, it doesn't actually matter because those are yours and they're personal. But I think the idea that we would heal alone is a relic of a capitalist co-opting of, it's like
a medicine. Can you get a medicine for healing? Not really.
No.
It's sort of not seen. So where does that come from? It's like you're saying, community, spiritual.
I think separation is, I think that in order to make people more attached to things than each other, you have to separate them from each other. And so, coming back to your question is, I think healing in community is key to both of these practices, body work and movement work. And I think that is also absolutely necessary to the wider conversation around decolonization. And we cannot heal in community while we see ourselves as different species. We can see ourselves as different people who've had different life experiences and different forces and different losses. We've had different losses.
Yes.
Your losses are different than mine. Your deficits are different than mine, but your strengths are also different than mine. And so in this time, like with the accelerating impacts on nature, we have to get over our identities and actually understand that community is the only way you're going to float.
Yes.
So, yeah. And the other thing you said, which I think is interesting, is of course grief is important. Of course trauma is important. And it's part of life. That's why indigenous cultures have tangies and they have grief rituals. It's every day. There was no assumption that you would get through this life unscathed. I think that is a fallacy that capitalism has told people, is you can be skinny forever, have some GLP-1. You can be beautiful at 85 like you were 25. It's a complete cessation of death. it's also a robbing of the inherent beauty and sanctity of life and death. It's this strange denial of the body. It's a strange denial of seasons. It's a strange denial of like the absolute like preciousness of every moment you get here. And it's it's a machination that we would play God, you know, whereas in a communal society, you're like, thank goodness one of the practices we did this week that I'm so grateful for Rochelle Schiek to introduce me to is something in Spanish called the despacho, which is a gratitude ceremony. And what she would say is on her journeys through Peru, through the mountains, every so often the indigenous guides she would stop with would do a despacho, which is a gratitude ceremony, not because they achieved their goal, but because they were just so grateful for the 1,000 steps that they did today. They're like, thank goodness we made it to this rock. Like, we need to all stop and start praying and say thank you for today, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. And that is such a different set of glasses to wear versus wanting to control everything about our lives. So, yeah.
In the Maori culture, we have tapu and mana. And my first podcast interview was with Clayton Rangatutia, and he educated me a little bit on tapu and mana, and that he said that they should never cross, which I was like a little bit surprised about, and I wanted to understand more about it. And he said with tapu, you create space and time for healing, and you can grieve in that space, and you give it the time for healing, and it enables you to work on and be in your mana when you need to be in your space of mana. And it was just a really beautiful thing about seeing someone who was so confident in their lives, just having their space for their grieving and also their space for doing their work as, standing strong. And and again, that comes through community and tradition, and you're passing those traditions forward.
And a inherent understanding of the seasonality of being human. So there's some really beautiful concepts in Mataranga Maori, and I'm just so grateful to have lived here for so long and like seen some. I don't understand all of it by any means, but the pieces that have landed have been just such an amazing framework to like comprehend the human condition. What I'm hearing you refer to is that in community cultures, there's an understanding that we're not always strong, is that we have the sun and the moon, is that we have the light and the dark, and we have the shadow, and we have the moments where we are feeling very strong. And that brings us to a very deeper question of like actually who and what guides our lives. And whatever that is, whatever that sacredness is. I had someone in last week's class, a Kiwi person, so beautiful, so sincere, so sweet, who said, I just need some help with sacred space because I don't know what that means. And this person loves the ocean. And so it was like, well, is the ocean a sacred temple for you? And they were like, absolutely, yes. I was like, then that's what you do. You pray to the ocean. It's like if you didn't have a cultural framework for prayer, if you didn't have prayers handed down for you, if there are no deities, if there's no sacred songs, that's fine. You hear it when you go to that sea. Then, that's authentic to you. And I think that something I've observed in settler cultures is when culture is robbed, you go directly to the earth. And I think you can relate to this. You go directly to the earth for the sacred. So coming back to that last thought is, what really guides our lives? I don't think we do. And I don't know anyone, and really, truly, who is able to cope with the kinds of trauma, when we're talking about the traumas of genocide, the traumas of death. There's a large percentage of my bodywork population that deal with bereavements, especially of children, whether in utero or later. Dealing with that kind of loss doesn't happen from the mind. It doesn't even happen from the heart. It definitely cannot. The body can hold it, but it can't hold it forever. When you spoke about genocide earlier, when you spoke about mass ecocide, if people don't have a spiritual framework, if they don't have a connection, they won't survive this kind of thing. So I don't know anyone who is coping with the level of shadow we see in the world, who doesn't hand it over to something bigger than themselves. That's when addiction comes in. That's where unbearable pain comes in, because we're not designed to do it alone.
To hold it ourselves.
No. No one will be able to convince me. No amount of like psychology will be able to convince me that without a third thing,
yes,
you experience, and the third unseen, that level of pain, this level of pain that we are living in right now, where it's like ecosystem after ecosystem, storm after storm, fire after fire, genocide after genocide, collapse after collapse. Our minds and bodies and hearts are not designed to hold this. We cannot hold it. Only the unseen can hold it.
yes.
So whatever that is for you, it's the only way through.
And I guess that's different for different people, and that's
100%.
okay. Yeah.
It's more than okay. It's necessary.
Yes.
It's so necessary. So, my prayers will be different than yours. Like who I talk to in my sleep will be different than yours.
I don't understand your prayers. I participate in them.
Yeah.
I chant with you, and Jessica gives me insights, but you don't necessarily need to understand them to be part of them and to believe in them and to have them work for you. You just kind of have to have faith and be open and allow. For me, I'm universal, so whatever the prayer may be heading, or whoever it may be dedicated to, it will come back to me, maybe through a particular faith, but it just feels universal.
Yeah.
It's not about letting it come back to base.
And I don't think it's anyone's business what anyone's beliefs are, what anyone's faith is. I don't have an organized system of belief. Like, I'm an animist. I was born an animist. I was not born into an animist culture. I was born.
Can I ask what an animist is?
Yeah, somebody who believes everything is alive. Everything
like
is alive.
A rock,
a tree, the ocean, the sky. This plant. These little statues that hold the prayers of like 5,000 years of Vedic culture. Our deceased pets, like. That we were here before, that will come again. And this isn't something someone told me. This is just the way I came into the world. And there's solace through, this is Shantimurti Saraswati. Some of your viewers might remember him. He passed 7 years ago. He was a really wonderful being in my life. He used to custodian the space that we now custodian. So we honor him as a living entity in some space-time reality. But it's not that I would say I believe in yoga. It's not that I would say I believe in Yucatec Masawal Maya culture. I think belief is a closed door. But like, when we believe something, we don't always leave the door open for growth. It's more about resonance and dissonance. So it's more about entering into that field of having intimacy with
curiosity.
Something. Yeah, it's curiosity, and it's also relationship. So, when you say you're a universalist, it's like it's testament to your incredible openness, that you are not shut down enough to dismiss someone who's different than you, or to dismiss someone who's had different life experiences than you. And you asked like earlier about Palestinians and like how did they maintain compassion. A lot of them are Muslim, some are Christian, some in occupied 48 are Jewish, and faith is the only thing when your children are blown up.
Yes.
The only thing you have is, what connects you to community. So it's not about my beliefs or your beliefs. It's about what prevents people from falling into a hole and coming out again. And so I think that we have to encourage each other to find our own prayers in this time. And whatever creates resonance and connection and feeds life should be supported. And whatever is destructive and anti-life needs to be examined and questioned compassionately. One of the kind of quotes that I lean into in this time, especially in this era of multiple genocides is something that Dr. Bilal Ware, who's running for governor of California, speaks about. He's a scholar of West African Islamic history. It's very healing for me to listen to Islamic perspectives, having being born into Islam, but being an animist. It's very healing to hear perspectives that are expansive, as I had my own trauma, which I feel I've done a lot of healing on. One of the things he speaks to is this idea that we are all related and we are all kin, and it is our job to prevent our siblings from oppressing. We have to save each other from becoming oppressors. And that's his belief. And I am very inspired by that.
When we hurt someone else, we're hurting ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we're all one.
Correct.
One being, ultimately.
Yeah. And that it's, if you see someone next to you succumbing to oppression, becoming an oppressor, it's your responsibility to help them.
To talk up, speak up.
Yeah, to
Take
try
action.
and help their spirit not disintegrate into that. And that is like, you know, I would just really like to be in the ocean all the time and like, you know, just probably be with animals more than trees, more than humans. But I do really feel that it's a responsibility to help other human beings to dismantle their inner oppressor. Because our species has the power right now and they're not using it very well. So I believe that's your responsibility and mine in the small ways that we have access to it. So.
Yeah, there's a beautiful energy in this room, and Sky River Sanctuary is just, wherever you go around here, it's just got a lovely energy. Where does that energy come from? Like I feel it here in the room, in the other home, around the property, down at the beach, just through here. It's just an amazing place. What's just developed that over?
I mean, I can make my best guess. I think that there's something about this land that's really holy, and that the holiness in the land called the people over time that would lay prayers down. But I think the people are in service to the land. I think the land wants to heal. It wants to help human beings. It sings. I've had a million experiences in this room. It's a very humble little old stable, but like mind-blowing experiences. And of course, all the lineages who are represented in this room, whether it's the Saraswati lineage or other yogic lineages, whether it's Adonai-Lihio's Yucatec Maya culture, whether it's Qoya and the roots of it that come from Peru, whether it's my own ancestors and the ancestors of everybody else who sits here, whether it's the corn that's been gifted from Taos Pueblo that like sings in the space a lot of the time, whether it's the native rongoa that grows on the land underneath the pine trees and wants to be represented, whether it's all the resins from Oman and other places, whether it's the medicine songs that many people have sung for I don't know. But I know that it weaves. This land like weaves, and it loves it. It loves to do that. And so it's just the privilege of a lifetime to meet a place like this.
Yes.
And to like meet the night sky and meet that ocean and just be like, wow, like, why are we destroying places like this to build shopping malls? Like, what are people going to buy that's going to feel better than this? I don't know.
Yeah. Jesus said to be in the world, not of the world. And I think that was a beautiful lesson I take from Jesus. And then I read Paramahansa Yogasana, the autobiography of a yogi, and he talks about Jesus as one of the people that I guess he admires and he prays to, and he spoke about that you know, one of the things that he took from Jesus was that we should be in the world, not of the world. So not of the things and the pieces, but actually living in it and being within it. And I guess because I loved that book and I loved everything that came out of it, I started to develop another level of interest in Jesus. I'm not in church, I'm not Catholic, I don't see myself as Christian. I see myself as universal, but I see Jesus as a very universal human being.
There's so much I would love to say.
Yes, and please do.
You know, with all full respect and love to everyone's faiths, if Jesus existed, he would today be a Palestinian. And this is so political, because, you know, the first Christians are Palestinian, Lebanese, Iraqi, Syrian. The first communities of Christians are in those lands, and they are currently being blown to bits and destroyed in the name of white evangelical pastors in America.
Amazing.
It is amazing. And National Geographic's rendition of what Jesus would have looked like is almost identical to one of my friends who's in Gaza, a brown-skinned person. So the unbelievable whitewashing of a historical character to cover up the pain that Europeans have felt, having lost their indigenous cultures, their original gods, their like harvest ceremonies, their songs, their prayers, to be colonized by the Roman Empire and have this beautiful character who was part of an indigenous system of what we call the Levant, which is also a faulty term, used to completely bowl over and destroy an entire continent and their old ways, is wild to me. So when Paramahansa Yogananda speaks to admiring Jesus, he speaks to the place beyond the separation and the place where repair is possible. One of the things that I'm always so moved by is the way in which Mother Mary has been like vacuumed in by indigenous cultures of Turtle Island and the Americas. Guadalupe, the Lady of the Corn Maiden, is hidden inside Guadalupe. So the old gods exist inside Mother Mary. And this you see again all through the Southwest, all through Central America, deep into South America, because traditional cultures had to hide inside the oppressor so that one day the seeds would grow and one day they would continue and they wouldn't forget. And so Jesus, anyone who prays to Jesus has to be interested in the genocide of his original people, or they're going to do what the current administration is doing. And it's just really interesting. It's a really interesting conversation because it's again the obfuscation of history. In terms of the church and the Catholic Church and what they did and what they didn't do, I don't know anyone who is really straight. So it's always interesting when people are deeply anti-gay or anti-trans or anti-anything, because who is fundamentally one or the other? We live on a continuum of what it means to be human. And I am consistently amazed by how little education there is in tolerance and how little education there is in history, like real history, like the real history of cultures and people. Because if we were allowed to understand, we would do what you did. We were like, that doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel right to me that my dad isn't allowed to take the body of Christ anymore because his relationship didn't work. Like, why is there a limit on compassion? And this is the same question I asked myself when I was about 3. I'm like, if I can have compassion for the people that you're telling me our religion doesn't have compassion for, then are you telling me God doesn't? Like, how am I more compassionate than the Almighty Creator? I'm not buying this shit. Do you know what I mean? Right. So it's unfortunately about control. And when you want to control resources, you have to control people. So if you want to free yourself up, you have to look at how resources are circulating around society and how that circulation impacts populations. Because at the back end of every one of these things is land theft, mines, deforestation, minerals. All of it, all of it. It just is very simple. Gas and petroleum. There's nothing more complex than that. It's about, so I was in Australia some years ago near Wollongong, where it's a sacred mountain that's supposed to be the home of the rainbow serpent. And for some of the tribes there's been 60,000 years of worship of this being. And that is the oldest continuous religion on earth. Wow. Which is nuts and amazing, right? So that land around those areas, so much mining is trying to come in. And so some of the beliefs of some of the custodians of those lands is that you can't keep taking the body of the serpent out of the earth. When you take the minerals out, you're breaking the snake down, and we need the snake to move around. And so it's just, in community cultures, their life was enough.
Yes.
Like the stars were enough, the water was enough, the fish were enough, each other was enough. Now nothing's enough.
Yeah.
And it's a cancerous snowball that's going to end with no one having anything.
Because we're moving away further from community to materialism.
Yeah, but materialism is quickly proving itself to be a faulty project, because there isn't enough for everybody if nothing is enough. So
if we can't find happiness within, we're not going to keep finding it by just getting more and more things, right?
And back to your quote about be in the world, not of the world, I think it depends what the definition of the world is. So when I hear the world, my God is the earth. Like the source of like love and beauty and inspiration is the earth and her family around. So I don't personally, I'm not speaking to from my family or my culture or like monotheism, but as someone who just came into the world an animist, the world is a holy and sacred and beautiful place. It's our contortions of what the world means. And I think that's what Paramahansa was talking about, is the human distortion, not the songs of the trees or the songs of the sea or the cicadas or, you know, the animals. Like, it's us.
So it's a deeper quote maybe than what it might be easily translated into, actually.
Yeah, I think it is deeper. And I think it speaks to human choice. And back to like, what do you do? What's your job?
Back to that very first question.
Yeah. Back to that is when in the realms of bodywork and movement, it's about restoring human choice about how to live in their body. And when we don't think we have a choice, when we think we have to look and feel a certain way in order to be accepted, to have the core feelings that a baby should just have when they come into the world, we never get to the point where we might hear a tree, or we might hear the ocean, or we might, you know, hear our ancestors, because we're so busy needing the love and acceptance we were supposed to get when we were born, because 4 generations ago that just got disrupted. So that's the work with human beings, is just helping them become whole, helping them to restore their own wholeness through community, so that they can be Homo sapiens, not destroyers. So,
about 2 years ago, when I stayed here with Jessica, and I had a pretty big dream. It might be 3 years ago, actually. And I was dreaming that my children, a wormhole opened up in this dream, and my 2 beautiful children, and it felt dark and cold and dangerous. And my 2 children went into the wormhole. I don't remember if they jumped in or whether they got enticed in. And it was very nerve-wracking. And I, as their father, you know, went in. It was all dark, quiet. I couldn't see or hear, but I could feel that it was very evil, and I wanted to rescue them. And we saw you on the beach, and Jessica said, "Brendan, tell Samar about your dream," and so you could interpret my dream. And what you shared with me about being the light, I found, you know, changed a lot of the way I think and live. So I was just wondering if you could maybe share with the audience a little bit about what that means to you.
So first, I just want to speak to dreaming in general, is that I think we are all dream keepers. Like, I think we are all herbalists, and I think we are all capable of these qualities that, you know, people will come and want to talk to me about, which is my favorite thing to do. But I also think you, as you have seen, your capacity for dreaming is very heightened. Your capacity for, you know, leaving your body in yoga nidra and having mystical experiences, it's innate for you. that dream, when you've reminded me of it, is just so interesting, because that wormhole could be so many things. But I think for this younger generation who's growing up in this time where there isn't a guaranteed future, you know, where they are facing like existential nihilism that I didn't and you didn't have to think about in the same way as a teenager has to think about now, where their futures are not guaranteed, their education doesn't guarantee them anything. Where ecosystems are not guaranteed, where, you know, 100 years from now is not guaranteed. It can feel like a black hole, because in a way it is. And so this idea of like you wanting to rescue them, it's like turn the light on in the space that you can. I think it speaks to that responsibility again, that we're cells and we have to do everything we can while we're alive. The outcome is not guaranteed for us, but our responsibility is a guarantee. You know, our job is not confusing. Like, we might go down and not finish it, and maybe someone in the future will pick it up. Maybe there won't be a future in the way that it exists now. Maybe it'll be better. But we don't get to stop. That's not an option.
Yes.
And so dreaming is everything. And I do believe, because I am extremely EMF sensitive, and that's, again, quite a horrible experience being alive today. When Wi-Fi and all that started coming out 25 years ago, I started to notice extreme disturbances with sleep, extreme disturbances with headaches. I have to just ask for what I need and tell people to turn their shit off. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. But what I have noticed on the plus side is, because I've had to do that to like function, my dream life is something people seem to think is abnormal, or like they don't experience it. And I'm like, do you sleep next to your phone? Do you sleep next to your smart TV? Do you have your whole house wired? Like, turn this shit off and see what happens. And like 9 out of 10 times stuff starts to happen, because their nervous system comes back on and is not oppressed. And in these containers physically, and even online, because I teach a lot online, the tandem dreaming begins almost on the second day. People show up in each other's dreams, they're seeing the same things, they're going into the non-ordinary space. Donnelly Hiopanti spoke about how, you know, the dreaming is where the spirits talk to you. It doesn't belong to one culture, and it definitely doesn't belong to one person.
Yes.
So I am not a better dreamer than you. I might be like a big sister of like, I know how to do this, so let me remind you that you also know how to do this. But I think that, like, so one of the famous stories about Donnelly Hiopanti was, he said when electricity came to the village, it was an emergency, because the women stopped dreaming. Because every morning they would gather, and this is not unique to the Masawal Maya culture, this is global. Whether you're talking about people in the Amazon rainforest, or in Maori culture, or like my mom's culture, or my dad's culture, or anyone else, is that the dreams were given great importance, and they were discussed every single day, because that's where we're like, what happened? Like, what happened while you were sleeping? Did they talk to you? What did they tell you? Like that, if you are mechanized by frequencies that throw you into like a constant beta state, so you never go into deep dreaming, a part of your psychology is just so numb and then so overstimulated that healing cannot happen. You stay in emotional loops forever. You don't have those messages that you got when you're here. Yeah, I turned the Wi-Fi off here. And you're like, my phone doesn't work, so what's the point of having it in the room? And then it's like, you're gonna hear the owls, you're gonna hear the sea as you fall asleep, the trees are gonna be very loud, and then you will go into that vortex. And it happens almost instantly for most humans, if they're allowed. And I do think like protecting your dreaming is one of the most important things a human being can do, to not be eaten by this system.
Do you think it's possible to suppress your dreaming because you fear experiencing what the dream may be?
Yeah, of course.
So,
Yeah.
of course.
Of course.
Yes.
It's like
yes.
emotions, of course. Of course. That's a complex conversation. And it depends what perspective you're looking at it from. It's like a psychological perspective would have a different story about that than someone from a indigenous healing perspective, than someone from a say a psychiatric perspective. But of course, your dreams will show you things that you have to deal with.
Yes.
And some of what you have to deal with is not pleasant. You know?
I had, for many years, very violent dreams. Either I was being chased by someone who wanted to harm me or my children, or I was chasing someone to probably harm them, probably out of protecting for something. And there were some pretty ugly dreams. And I thought it was normal because I'd been doing it for so long, until I spoke to a few people, probably including yourself, about the dreams I was having, and that's not normal. I kind of thought, oh, everyone has violent dreams every night. I thought that was how you dream. And more recently, I've started having nice dreams again, only through doing a lot of work. But the dreams tell the story about where you're at, so they're worth listening to, right?
And, you know, anger is a response to violation, and your dreams are releasing the pent-up energy. If you were dealing with any situations where your needs were not being heard, or, you know, family things or whatever it is, like the motif you're painting of children and stuff, it's normal for the psyche to want to blow off steam in that space, you know. There's different types of dreams. And I'm not the authority on what they are, but I can identify quite a few just through lived experience. Biographical dreams are one. So like our personal stuff is one.
Yes.
Others are, you know, other people, like dreaming about people in your life and what they're going through and dreaming for them. That's the interpersonal layer. There's dreams with spirits. There's dreams with the deities, like you had about the Saraswati necklace. There's dreams of different times. There's time bending. There's all kinds of things that happen. And it's just as much your life as your body is. So don't let a machine prevent you from half of your life. I think that's really...
Turn the phone off. Turn the Bluetooth
turn it off.
Yeah.
Turn off all the... Why would you be using it while you're asleep?
Yes.
And people are like, it's my alarm. I'm like, you can go to the store and buy a $6 digital clock. That's the biggest cop-out I've ever heard, you know?
So someone who may not be dreaming because they're suppressing dreams, would a starting point be turn the phone off? And
Sorry, I'll let you finish your question.
Yeah, I guess it's the next part of the question was, you know, turn the phone off, and what would be some of the other steps that you could maybe take to experience that first dream again?
So lots of people in my life have been going through this. I think that it's not just the phone. I think that as we get into the Internet of Things, and you look around and you see how much tech is on all the time, whether it's a smart oven or a smart dishwasher or a smart doorbell or a smart thermometer, there's so many things that are emitting constantly, and it's really difficult if people have bought into that situation. So as much as possible, whether it's installing a breaker that turns the whole thing off, or whether it's disabling these things, because in some things you can disable these emitters, getting as quiet as possible, and that can involve some investigation beyond just the phone. There's iPads, there's watches, there's TVs are really extreme. You know, they're big, they send out a huge field. Sometimes even non-smart devices like a freezer can have such a big emission rate. Just they're strong. You can't sleep if you're close to them. Sometimes just old wiring with things plugged into it overnight really keeps people in a very light level of sleep. So the only way they'll know is if turn as much off as possible and figure out what works in the home that they're in. People are also deeply depleted minerally. Magnesium is one, calcium's another. Plants help you. And I'm not talking about psychoactives necessarily. Cacao is a great dream medicine, but this last week, people were dreaming about plants that we put in a fire. They would breathe in eucalyptus and start dreaming about the lands it came from. You know, they would put a hawthorn berry next to their pillow and dream about being with the hawthorns. So there's many, many things, but I think it's don't rob yourself from the potential of the beauty of your own non-ordinary life. And don't let a tech company tell you what you're allowed to experience. Because this is, like with the AI ascent, they are essentially telling you what you're allowed to experience. And I want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
You know, like how is that different from the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
It's not.
There'll be another conversation.
Another conversation. Thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, so for wrapping up, if we're looking, say, 50, 100, 500 years into the future, as the human race, what should we be thinking about right now?
So there's probability and then there's possibility. Probability is very bleak. You know, I love science because science is a beautiful, ever-evolving observation of the living world and living systems, and all I care about are living systems, right? Probability is very bleak, especially if we continue on this trajectory. You know, a whole beach in Iceland has vanished. All the sand is gone because of the last storm. A book I read probably about almost 10 years ago called The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. He spoke about when the temperature would start to ascend, the events that would come with those small degree increases would happen very, very fast. And I think that there's been a belief in people that it would be a slow, gradual process. But in the last 3 years, we are seeing it's not a slow, gradual process. And the thing about his book that was the most painful for me was he said sand would disappear. And I've grown up on the beach. I've grown up in the desert. I'm like, what do you mean sand is going to disappear? Sand has just disappeared. So on a probability level, you know, it's really difficult unless we change everything. Possibility is something else. And I had an experience, again, a dream experience, and I'm happy to share this with your audience. Maybe 10 years ago, where I was in the clouds, like amorphous, without a body, with two energies, and your sound system, they said to me, we were kind of planning, you know, coming back next time to this place. If people don't believe in reincarnation, I'm sorry, but that's fine. That's the experience I was having. And, you know, the whole of that potentiality was laid out for me and then erased, so I wouldn't remember it. But all I remember were two things, is when it would be, and it was some 100 years from now, and that life would be so good on this planet. And what I could see was the whole world was just covered in trees, and there were very few people, and that would be such a good thing. And so that can sound kind of distressing, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like we're in a moment of like frenzy right now, but maybe in a couple of centuries we'll just return to a softer, quieter place where we hear the earth more.
Yes.
So I try to hold on to possibility while not ignoring probability, because my responsibility is to act in accordance with probability while cultivating possibility.
Beautiful, Samar. Thank you so much for today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've covered a lot. And how will people find you?
I can give you my website and my Instagram if you want to put it below. TulishIndigenousArts.com. That's TULIX indigenousarts.com, and it's the same on Instagram at Tulish Indigenous Arts. And from there they can find my website and everything else, but you'll get a really good idea of the work that we do from there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thanks for watching, and feel free to connect with me on my socials. If there's anything you'd like to ask at any time, you can also contact me on brendan.rolston@actionhq.co. Until next time, stay connected, be creative, and enjoy your day.